retrograde on the 4th. At 13 degrees, 8 minutes of Aries. Then on the 2nd of April, Venus is going to go backwards back into Pisces. So it'll cross that 0 degrees of Aries point. This is a very, very important point in the zodiac. Whenever there's a planetary alignment with that point, typically big things can happen. So we want to flag that ahead of time here in anticipation of early April. Even though we're focusing on March here, there's a lot of this action from the retrograde cycle that's starting right now with Venus that will really play out during April and beyond here. So on the 2nd of April, Venus will retrograde. It'll cross over that 0 Aries point, going backwards. On the 15th of April, we'll have the Venus direct station. It'll resume forward motion again. It will have backed up at that point to 26 degrees 54 minutes of Pisces as it begins going forward. Then once it's going forward, it will take it another 8-10 days or so to get back to that 0 Aries point again. So on the 28th of April, Venus will make that direct ingress it'll be moving in direct motion. It'll go back over that 0 point of Aries, another important date to keep an eye on. Then finally on the 18th of May, Venus will get back to where it was when it started this whole process on the 4th of March. The retrograde return when Venus will once again reach that point of 13 degrees and 8 minutes of Aries will come on the 18th of May. So just to put this in perspective, the last time we had Venus go retrograde was end of July through early September 2015. So this is not something we get every year. Every couple of years or so we get the Venus retrograde period. After this, the next one will not come in until toward the end of next year, starting early in October and ending in mid-November of 2018. So we can see just a sense of when these retrograde periods occur. I think it's important to understand this distinction. We look a lot, for example, at Mercury retrograde. That happens 3 times a year. So we're talking about Mercury retrograde a lot. Venus retrograde is a little bit rarer phenomenon, so we want to pay attention to it in particular. Now, the Venus retrograde period, and indeed this applies to this whole cycle phenomenon here from the 4th of March, especially until the 15th of April, but really on beyond that with some residual effect till the 18th of May. The effect of the Venus retrograde is to reduce financial activity. It's not a real good time to start a new business or a new business venture, open a new branch or what have you. So we want to be cautious about sticking our neck out financially during this whole period here, and especially from the 4th of March all the way through the 15th of April, the time when Venus is actually in retrograde motion. Sometimes we'll see a pullback in the markets as well. There does not appear to be quite that strong a correlation, and there's different responses to the retrograde station itself. So let's take a moment and focus on this retrograde station, which is coming up here on the 4th of March. Here's the chart for that event. It comes at about 9 minutes after 4 in the morning on Saturday the 4th of March. We've set all these charts, by the way, of course, for New York City. Essentially, we're using our bias here of the New York City chart, and of course here is where Venus is as it goes retrograde down here near the bottom of the chart wheel. As we've noted, it makes the station at 13.8 of Aries as it does so. Now, one of the things this does is form a semi-sextile, a 30-degree angle to this conjunction of Mercury at 11 degrees of Pisces, Neptune 11 degrees Pisces, the Sun at 13 degrees of Pisces. So these are all kind of lumped together there, 30 degrees away from the Venus station. So that comes into play in a particularly significant way. This gives an idea of, especially because of the involvement of Neptune here, that around this time of the retrograde station, we may see an evidence of swindles, of fraudulent activities, or ideas that may seem great but are just impractical. So if something looks too good to be true around this time? It probably is. We would exercise and urge caution, not only in the trading environment, but in other affairs as well. So if you're looking at picking up a real bargain somewhere, take a second look and be sure that it's the bargain that you think it is. So that's one of the factors that we see in play here with the Venus retrograde station. It activates this triad of planets, or a triple conjunction of Mercury, Neptune, and the Sun, bringing about this connotation. In addition to that, we've got a semi-square, a 45-degree angle from Venus over to the conjunction of the Moon and the trans-Neptunian Admetos, the Moon at 29 of Taurus, Admetos at 28 of Taurus. So this is a very, very powerful combination here. It's indicative oftentimes of the death of a prominent woman. Oftentimes this can be somebody who's in the public spotlight, and also and you know, we have the death or disablement, so to speak, of somebody who has a prominent position, you know, in world affairs and in politics, in the social spectrum, what have you. We also, so we want to be alert to the potential for that kind of occurrence, not just on the date itself, but in the days following this, because this really sets up a pattern that goes through this whole retrograde period. Of course, the greater likelihood is we'll see these kinds of occurrences around this date coming up this coming weekend here. The people must be contented with limited resources, cramped spaces. We're trying to inhibit the movement of people as one of the motifs coming out of this Venus retrograde station. This is in addition to those financial restrictions that we mentioned earlier. This is the 90-degree dial for the Venus retrograde station. The red pointer at the left is the position of Venus, of course, here. So as we look at that, then what we're concerned with is identifying some of these midpoint structures, what gets triggered here by Venus at the time. And the dominant one here is all about Saturn and Vulcanus. We see Saturn in blue toward the top of the wheel there, Vulcanus in black that looks like a little triangle with an arrow on top of it on the lower left-hand side of the wheel. So the Saturn-Vulcanus midpoint gets activated by Venus at the time of its retrograde station. This is indicative of situations that are highly guarded. There's a lot of enforcement going on, imprisonment of people. There's a sense of paranoid vigilance. And all this adds to the intensity of the pain and suffering that can be caused by enforced separation from loved ones. So we would expect to hear news of people being forcibly separated from their families, and some pretty challenging circumstances coming out of this. Now, this may or may not directly impact the financial markets, but it carries a special significance to this Venus retrograde period. So remember, if we hear news around this weekend or in the days immediately following that especially, about these kinds of situations with increased numbers of people being imprisoned, or especially families being broken up through law enforcement activities or imprisonment of one kind or another, then we want to pay attention to that entire Venus cycle and watch these other dates that we mentioned with regard to the Venus cycle. The direct station, of course, on the 15th of April, the retrograde return on the 18th of May. These could be significant dates or turning points in some of these situations, especially if they become evident around the time of the retrograde station on the 4th of March.